Hey, my name's Anna and I like to read, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my recent reads. So instead of doing the monthly wrap-ups, I decided that I would be doing recent reads, and I will be splitting them up by 4 books. So each recent reads will have 4 books. So the first book I want to talk about is What Does Consent Really Mean? And this is a graphic novel that follows a set of classmates following the sexual assault of their classmate, and as they go home they discuss what consent really means. So I thought this graphic novel did an excellent job with different discussions of consent and healthy relationships, and it also had a great art style. However, I did not like how one of the main characters was very quickly forgiven, and there was a very quick turnaround after he pressured his girlfriend into having sex. So I thought that while this graphic novel is important and has great resources at the end and has great art style and also discusses important topics, at the same time I did not like the quick turnaround for the character in this book. The next book I want to talk about is Radio Silence. So Radio Silence follows a biracial, bisexual British Ethiopian girl who is an academic overachiever, and she listens to this podcast, University City, and she draws fan art for it, and eventually she finds out who the creator of the podcast is, and they start working together on the podcast as she draws fan art for it, and a friendship forms between them. So I liked a lot about this book. I thought it was great that the main relationship between the male and the female character was platonic, and it was just a friendship. There was no romance between them. I liked how the characters felt really authentic and real. I also liked how there was a demisexual character in this book, and that was discussed. In addition to that, I liked how there were characters of different sexualities in this book, and that was also discussed. My favorite part about this book was how it discussed the education system and how it showed how it pressures students today and the academic pressure students face. And I think it does a great job on exploring how academic pressures affect the mental health of students. However, there was no plot and there was also an open ending. So while I think this book was an excellent commentary on the education system and how it impacts mental health of students, at the same time it had no plot and there was just an open ending, and it didn't feel very resolved at the end. The next book I want to talk about is Clap When You Land. So Clap When You Land follows 2 sisters. One of them is Camino, who lives in the Dominican Republic, and the other is Yahara, and she lives in New York City. And neither of them knows about each other until their father dies in a plane crash, and they find out about each other and also about all of his secrets. So I thought this book had beautiful prose. I also thought it did an excellent job at portraying loss, grief, mourning, and forgiveness. Also, while the main focus of this book was not on Yahara's relationship with her girlfriend or her sexuality, I thought both of those things were cleverly weaved into her story in combination with her grief. Despite all of the positives of this book, I do wish that this book was more plot driven, because this book was very character driven and there was basically no plot in this book as well. Also, now that I've read all of Elizabeth Acevedo's 3 books, I do want to say that this is my least favorite, and my favorite one so far has been With a Fire on High. The last book I want to talk about is The Goldfinch. So this follows Theo, who survives a bombing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art that kills his mother, and following that he clings to a painting that reminds him of his mother, and it follows Theo for about a decade or so as he grows up and deals with his PTSD, his survivor guilt, and him trying to form relationships and friendships as he grows up. So I thought that the writing for this novel was excellent. I thought that it felt like a memoir. I also listened to the audio and I read along with the book at times, and I have to say that the narrator did an excellent job at narrating the story. It felt so real and so authentic. And I understand that part of it was because the writing was so excellent, but I also believe that the narrator himself brought so much life to the characters and did such a great job narrating this book, because he also did different voices for the characters very well. I also thought that the characters were well developed and felt very authentic and real. In addition to that, I also thought that this book was a great exploration of grief, mourning, and being a survivor, and also feeling out of control and helpless. However, I did not like how around 600 pages in, the novel felt like a different genre. It felt like it turned into a crime novel and that it was going into a complete different direction. I also did not like how this book had an open ending. I listened to Theo's point of view on audio, and I also read the book at times. For about 800 pages, when a book spans around a decade or so, it has to have a closed ending and things should be resolved. And I did not feel that way about the ending of this book. Usually I don't like when books have open endings. I can usually forgive that in a book if it makes sense, or if it was a short book, or if it didn't span so many decades. However, that is not the case for The Goldfinch, and I wanted a more of a closed ending. I wanted more resolution at the end of the book. I didn't like how this book ended at all. As you can see, I tabbed so many pages in this book, and I actually did tab the last page, but I'm not going to show you because if you want to read it, it might have spoilers. And here's what I wrote. What kind of ending is this? Seriously, WTF, I just listened to you ramble on for almost 800 pages. No resolution. WTF, okay, whatever. Overall, I think this was a great literary fiction novel. I think it did a lot of great things. It had wonderful writing. It had characters that felt authentic and real and relatable. I thought that it explored grief and mourning and addiction and being out of control and helpless, and how childhood trauma follows you into adulthood if you do not face it. I thought those were such excellent things that this book portrayed and explored. However, I did not like how this ended because I felt like there was no resolution. I just think a book this long should not have had an open ending and should have had some kind of resolution and not have ended so abruptly after 800 pages of a decade, basically. So those are the 4 books that I read recently. What books have you read recently? Let me know down in the comments below.